There was a smell. You know the one. It hit you the moment you woke up on a Sunday morning, and it told you, before you opened your eyes, before you looked at a clock, before you did anything at all, that today was different. Something was already cooking, had been cooking, maybe, since before you were awake. Something low and slow and patient that filled the whole house, moved through the hallways, came under your bedroom door, wrapped itself around you like something warm and familiar and permanent. And you lay there for a moment, just a moment, knowing exactly what that smell meant. It meant Sunday. It meant the whole family would be at that table. It meant that for a few hours, everything else would stop. Sunday was different. And I don't just mean the dinner, though we'll get to that. I mean the whole day had a texture unlike any other day of the week. It started quieter. The neighborhood moved slower. There were more cars in driveways, fewer people rushing. A general collective decision, unspoken, unorganized, that today was not the day for hurrying. For many families, it began with church, the ritual of getting dressed in specific clothes that existed only for Sunday, the particular smell of a church, candles and wood polish and old hymn books, the drive home with the windows slightly down even when it was cold. And then you came home, and the kitchen was already alive, or it came alive the moment you walked through the door, depending on your family, depending on your tradition. But here is the thing about Sunday dinner that I want to talk about honestly. It was never really about the food. The food was the reason. The food was the anchor. The food was what pulled everyone to the same room at the same time and kept them there. But what happened around that food, what happened in the hours before it and during it and after it, that was something else entirely. That was the thing that held families together in ways that nobody ever thought to name. Because you don't name the air you breathe. You just breathe it. Until one day you realize, quietly, with a kind of sadness that sneaks up on you, that the air has changed. And you've been trying to breathe the old kind ever since. Let's talk about the preparation. Because the dinner didn't begin when everyone sat down. It began hours before. In many homes, it began Saturday night. Something put in to soak. Something pulled from the freezer. A quiet act of planning that nobody announced, but everyone understood. And Sunday morning, while the rest of the family was still finding their footing, someone was already in the kitchen, working, in a way that the word cooking doesn't quite capture. This was not meal preparation in the modern sense. This was not pulling something from a package and following instructions on a screen. This was knowledge, passed down, practiced, carried in the hands more than in the head. The way a woman knew, without measuring, how much flour was right. The way she could tell by the smell alone whether something needed more time. The way she moved around that kitchen with a kind of authority that belonged to her completely. This was her domain, her craft, her gift to everyone who would sit at that table. And the smells built through the morning, layer by layer. First something faint and promising, then richer, then fuller, until by early afternoon the whole house was saturated with it, and everyone in every room knew, in their bones, that something good was coming, that someone had been working for hours, not because they had to, but because that is what love looked like on a Sunday. And then people came. This is the part that has changed perhaps more than anything else. In many families, Sunday dinner was not just the immediate family. It was the extended family. It was the grandparents who lived nearby, the aunt and uncle from across town, the cousins who arrived loud and running, the older relative who sat in the same chair every single week without anyone assigning it. It was simply understood that the chair was theirs. There was always someone helping set the table. Someone being sent to get extra chairs from another room. Someone calling into the backyard that dinner was nearly ready. Someone sneaking something from the kitchen and getting their hand gently swatted away. The house was full. Not full in the way of a party, with noise and performance and people trying to impress each other. Full in a quieter, deeper way. The fullness of people who knew each other completely, who didn't have to explain themselves, who could sit in the same room and say very little and still feel held by each other's presence. Grandparents sat at that table who had lived through wars and losses and hardships that the younger people around them could barely imagine. children sat at that table who were loud and restless and sticky-fingered and full of an energy that the older people around them had long since spent. And everyone in between, all of it at the same table, all of it in the same room, for a few hours on a Sunday, 3 and sometimes 4 generations, sharing the same meal and the same air and the same ordinary moment that none of them knew they would spend the rest of their lives trying to find their way back to. Here is what I remember most about that table. Not the food, though the food was real and important and made with genuine love. What I remember most is the conversation, and not just the happy parts. Sunday dinner was where things got said that wouldn't get said anywhere else. It was where the grandfather told a story he had told 100 times before, and everyone let him tell it again, because the telling was as important as the story. Because watching his face while he told it was something worth more than efficiency. It was where the adults talked about things that went slightly over the children's heads. Money, neighbors, family matters, the news of the week, and the children absorbed it without fully understanding it, filed it away somewhere, and retrieved it years later, surprised by how much had landed. It was where disagreements happened, real ones, because people who love each other disagree, and the table was somehow safe enough to hold that, the argument and the love existing in the same space without one canceling the other. It was where the quiet relative finally said something that made everyone laugh so hard the table shook. It was where someone's news got announced. A pregnancy, a job, a move, a loss, to the people who most needed to hear it first. The table was a place of truth, not always comfortable truth, not always easy, but truth shared among people who were staying, who weren't going anywhere, who would be back next Sunday, and the Sunday after that, and the Sunday after that. That permanence, that absolute taken for granted certainty that this would keep happening was perhaps the greatest luxury any of us ever had, and we spent it like we had an infinite supply. And then there was the afternoon. This part nobody talks about enough. What happened after the plates were cleared? The men moved to the living room, or the porch, or the backyard. And they sat in that particular way that men of that generation sat. Not quite relaxed, but not quite formal either, talking about things that mattered to them. Cars, work, sports, the state of things, or not talking much at all, just present, together, in the same space with the same ease of people who didn't need to perform for each other. The women stayed in the kitchen longer, cleaning up, yes, but also talking in a way that was different from the table, more honest sometimes, more themselves. The kitchen after Sunday dinner was its own kind of sanctuary. The children disappeared outside or into the back rooms, running on the particular energy of children who had been made to sit still for an hour and were now released back into their natural state of motion. And the afternoon moved slowly. The light changed. Someone fell asleep in a chair. Someone made coffee. Someone's child climbed into a grandparent's lap and stayed there while the adults talked around them. And nobody looked at a clock. Not really, because Sunday afternoon existed outside of time in a way that no other part of the week managed. It was the one moment in 7 days when the pace of life dropped to something human, something that matched the actual speed of feeling. And people just stayed, not because they had planned to stay, not because there was something keeping them there, but because being there felt better than being anywhere else. So what happened to it? Where did the Sunday dinner go? Because most of us who grew up around that table don't gather that way anymore, or gather far less, or gather with fewer people, or gather but feel somewhere underneath the gathering that something essential is different. And the reasons are real and complicated and worth being honest about. Families spread out. The economy changed. People moved for work, across cities, across countries. And the grandparents who were once 20 minutes away became a plane ride away. The geography of family life scattered. Schedules fragmented. Sunday stopped being protected. Stores opened. Sports leagues scheduled games on Sunday mornings. Brunch became a thing. the day lost its borders. The extended family dinner quietly became the immediate family dinner. And then the immediate family dinner quietly became more occasional. And then occasional became, for many families, something that only happened at holidays. And then holidays became complicated. And nobody decided this. Nobody sat down and said, we are going to stop having Sunday dinner. It just eroded. One reasonable exception at a time. One schedule conflict that got accommodated. One year when the gathering was smaller and nobody quite addressed why. Until the children who grew up at that table became the adults who didn't quite know how to rebuild it, who felt the absence of it like a hunger they couldn't name, who drove past their childhood homes sometimes and thought about that smell. The one that hit you before you even opened your eyes. The one that said, today is different. Everyone will be here. Everything will stop. And for a few hours, we will simply be a family at a table together. I want to tell you what I think we actually lost when we lost Sunday dinner. It wasn't the meal. We eat. We still eat. We eat perhaps better and more varied food than any generation before us. It wasn't even the family time. We find time for family in other ways, other moments, other forms. What we lost was the ritual, the shared, repeated, weekly ritual that said, this matters enough to stop for. You matter enough to cook for. We matter enough to gather for. Every single week, without negotiation, without checking if it works for everyone's schedule, without making it an event. Just Sunday. Just here. Just this. The ritual was a promise kept without words every 7 days. A promise that said, no matter what happened this week, no matter how scattered we got, no matter how much the world pulled us in different directions, on Sunday we come back, we sit down, we eat together. We are still a family. There is something in the human heart that needs that promise, needs to know that there is a table somewhere with a place set for you, needs to know that someone has been cooking since morning, needs to know that the people who matter most will be in the same room at the same time, and that nothing, not schedules, not convenience, not the noise of the world outside, will be allowed to take that away. We stopped making that promise to each other, slowly, reasonably, with good enough reasons every single time. And something went quiet in the center of family life that hasn't been loud again since. This is Front Porch Stories. Before the world got loud, we lived something worth remembering. I'll see you on the porch.